Welcome back to the Nature Repair and Climate Adaptation stream. Thank you for choosing this stream for the afternoon. First up, we've got Tony Wales from Manning Coastcare and Wallabi Point Group presenting about the Wallabi Point Littoral Rainforest Adaptation Embraced. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get everybody out of the office, get everybody out of the halls of academia, because today I want to get our hands dirty. So I'll just kick off by... Okay. Right, I just want to acknowledge the Biripi people on the land on which we work and respect sorry, can you hear me? Better? I'm seeing somebody going. Okay, I just want to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of the Biripi Nation. And with Littoral Rainforest at Wallabi Point, we've gone through a lot in the last 5 to 6 years. We've gone through climate change, drought, fire, floods, intense storms, more frequent, more powerful, big waves, I mean big waves, coastal erosion, even bigger floods, even bigger waves, coastal recession, and now we're facing ecosystem collapse. So this is Wallabi Point. It's located about 15 kilometres east of Taree on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. The population of Wallabi Point is around 600 people, give and take B&B bookings and weekends and whatever else goes on. Probably doubles over Christmas, New Year. We are a group, we're associated with Manning Coastcare, and Manning Coastcare this year is celebrating its 30th anniversary, and we are also looking 30 years into the future. In fact, we're going way beyond that. We're just saying 30 years past, 30 years future. So this is the layout of Wallabi Point. This was actually a big swell. It was 4 days consecutive of 12 to 15 foot surf, and this was the first day. And we lost a lot of sand during that event, but I'll go on to talk about that later. Wallabi Point is surrounded by National Park, Saltwater National Park, Capping Hat Nature Reserve, and the big blue Pacific Ocean. On the 9th of November 2019, the Hillville fire struck Wallabi Point. It hit about 9 a.m. in the morning. The total fire area was about 31,200 hectares. What you're looking on the screen there is just 2,000 square hectares. You can see the village of Wallabi Point up in the top right-hand corner, and I'm going to go above that, further in that top right-hand corner, and we're looking at that. Now you can see in that inset the bright strip of green. That is the Wallabi Point rainforest. The canopy survived the fire. The understory didn't. We lost a lot of vines, we lost all the seedlings, and all we were left with was the canopy. Fortunately, we ended up, the entire size of the rainforest was about 5.5 hectares. We ended up with 3.5 hectares of canopy. So we set about going, well, what's going to happen? And after the fire, it started to look like this. So it burnt right to the beach. Old friends returned, good old ground asparagus, and there was a lot of that. But this was one of the real shockers. That's Bitu bush. Right, so, and that's 1 year after the fire. So we're talking knee-high and a bit higher Bitu bush after the fire. there are somewhere in amongst all that a couple of lomandra plants. You'll also notice above, they're either, and all of the trees are dead in that area, that's either coastal tea tree on the edge of the forest, and that was 100% death. And the others are coastal banksias, and we estimate that the coastal banksias, about 80% died. Okay, so what we did was we set about, so our group, I'll just give you a quick back on the group. The group's about 20 people, 20 members, population is 600. We're looking at about 3% of the village is Coastcare members. And each week we have around about 6 to 10 people come along and do 2 hours each Thursday morning. Then we go for coffee and cake. Always important to mention that with Coastcare. So our objective was to re-establish the ecological integrity to the fire-damaged Littoral Rainforest ecosystem by restoring natural processes and resiliency. So the strategies involved, number one, prioritise the surviving vegetation, the green islands amongst the bird landscape, because that is where your resiliency is going to start. It will seed, although we did find a lot of it was after the fire was delayed. Even the tuckaroos went to like 2 seasons, 3 seasons without fruit, but then they started to fruit again. We then prioritise weeds where needed. I really emphasise that because our group isn't big. There's a lot of work to do, and we had to work out what were the priority weeds. We had to suppress, get rid of all the transformer weeds, and we did that where it was limiting natural regeneration. So if it was an area we weren't planning to regenerate, we left the weeds because we just didn't have time. We would never have got to them. The third point was repair edges and canopy. And I'm going to emphasise here, by far the number one thing to do in a littoral rainforest after fire is secure the leading edge, the coastal edge, because that's where your salt scalding and your wind scalding is all going to come from. And what we did was, very successfully, we used bitu bush. So we left the bitu bush and allowed it to grow, and that grew very quickly, grew faster than any of the native plants, and we protected the edge. So the rainforest's ecological role in the landscape is to maintain a genetic and biodiversity biological corridor. So south of us is Saltwater National Park, north of us is Old Bar Littoral Rainforest, and in between is a strip of green, apart from a small bit where Wallabi Point is, and we wanted the genetics to flow up, continue flowing. We wanted the birds to continue to carry seed. We wanted all the wildlife, because we have the brush turkeys and the goannas coming in and wandering around. We also found quite a population of echidnas in there. So that was for the Coastcare's actual role in the community. We call ourselves the custodians of the rainforest. We don't talk about custodians of the land. We say we're the custodians of the rainforest. And our objective is to reduce threats and damage. So we're aware of what threats are. The biggest threat going forward is going to be fire again. The second biggest threat is man. In any way he can come up with it, he'll come up with it. And the rehabilitation technique we're applying is assisted natural regeneration. So we're working with nature and to complement nature. We also developed this, and we call it our legacy for future coast carers. And I think it's also a good resource for anybody who might have anything to do with littoral rainforest and experience fire, as it takes you through the whole process. In our case, I wanted this to really be there in the future for the next generation and the generation after that of the land carers. For the first time ever, we got a species list of our rainforest, In fact, prior to 2019, no one knew we actually had a rainforest. I walked into it and went, why aren't people talking about this? So I did the species list, we've done weeds lists, we've done all sorts of things in here. It's like a real how-to guide on how to rehabilitate Littoral Rainforest after fire. I also should point out that we're talking here about Littoral Rainforest on sand substrate. So we have sand substrate in between the headlands, and the headlands are igneous rock, so old volcanic rock. So that is there. If you ever want to find it, it's quite easy. Mid-coast to tops land care, and just look at Wallabi Point, Littoral Rainforest. Sorry. So to give you a quick idea what we did, our immediate response was to triage the whole site. We worked out the priorities, we worked out what resources we had, we worked out our options. The streets, we used strategic weeds, and immediately the first plant to come back was blackberry nightshade. And all of the coast carers, our coast carers, all went, we've got to get it. And I'm saying, no, leave it, because that was the only food for bird species in the area. And I also knew that in 12 months' time it would not compete with the native regeneration. And so that happened. 12 months later you could barely find a blackberry nightshade. Probably just sitting there waiting for the next disturbance. Also, I looked for easy wins. This is where I was looking for jobs we could do, and a lot of this involved being around the edge of the access, the formal access, a concrete path that was put in, and we were working around there because that was good for the community. It felt like a real win. Whereas when we'd go up in the rainforest, they'd never see the work. So I was splitting the time between the aesthetics and the environmental issues. We had volunteer education, and here I'm talking about not the community in general, I'm just talking about the coast carers. What we would do is when we'd be working, and we'd be working for 2 hours, and after an hour and a half I'd go, knock off time, let's go for a walk around and we'll talk about the plants and we'll talk about what's happening in the rainforest, which I thought worked out was very, very effective. But as time moved on, things started to change, and we had started to have to rethink and a different think about what was going on. And this is where adaptation started. So we had to start adapting. Nature was changing, and a lot of cases here, things were happening that we didn't, or we hadn't experienced before. So we had things like weeds can be friends, natives can be enemies, especially post-fire response and sclerophyll shift into the mesophilic rainforest area. The good bush versus the bad bush, and in this case I'm talking about what I just mentioned, where environmental needs weighed up against the aesthetic needs. Community volunteer and education, this is where we opened it up. We started doing walks through the rainforest. We started having sessions with professional bush regenerators who would come in and talk about the Littoral Rainforest. One specialist in the industry would come in and give talks. But underlying this the whole time, something was very wrong, and we were thinking, it's the environment. Before I get onto that, I'll just give you a quick look at the sort of things we did. So here's Bitu Bush. So Bitu Bush is good on the edge of the Littoral Rainforest. So on that coastal edge, we left it all. It grows very quickly. We did make one area where the guys really wanted to clear it so that we could, when we were on the headland looking across, you didn't see Bitu. So we cleared all that. The downside was the recovering rainforest behind it never recovered. So it did further in, but on that immediate edge, the salt spray was getting in, the wind was getting in, and the damage was done. It was only about 40 metres in length of the whole thing. So not that big of an issue. So the other thing we did was, on the other side, we had masses. On the other side of that rainforest canopy, on the landward side, we had masses of bitu bush come up. And one of my very first experiences was how much time was spent on taking care of one bitu bush because of the way... By the way, I only moved up there the week of the fire. So post-fire, and I got involved, I just went, yeah, I'm going to watch what these guys do. And I saw one occasion where 6 people took 20 minutes to dismantle a bitu bush and kill it. I'm an industrial engineer by training. I was the guy that used to go around the factory with the stopwatch. So I just held my breath for a while and then I said, okay, I'm going to show you guys how to kill this plant in 15 seconds. And this is how we did it. So we just do a 5 to 10 centimetre scrape on the hardwood. So you go in, down through the plant into the hardwood, 5 to 10 centimetres. 10 centimetres is being generous. Just some neat glyphosate, and we're going to start testing now weaker levels of glyphosate, and then walk away. You come back 3 weeks later and the plant's yellow. It's well and truly on its way out. What that also does, it lets you see what you missed, because they're all still bright green. So you go in and get those, and in 2 months we'd killed all of the bitu bush on that side of the rainforest. So incredibly efficient way of doing it. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with this idea, but it's now caught on around the area, and some of the other groups are using it. So we then move on to the next plant. So this one was interesting because I was unaware of it. No one really knew about it. But we did have Banksia, coastal Banksia. As I said, about 80% of them died. And so we were left with a lot of dead trees. And I always remembered the big scrub lesson with the camphor laurels about leaving them, and I started monitoring what was going on underneath our Banksias, and it turned out the highest biodiversity underneath the Banksias was the highest biodiversity in the forest. So it's where the perch tree, where the birds were going, they were dropping their seed. We were finding celery woods and ribbon woods and sandpaper figs and red ash and Clerodendron tomentosum, and they're all coming up everywhere around them. Walk back a little bit and we'd see nothing. Not nothing, we'd still find others, but definitely that. So in terms of planting, it's been Banksia integrifolia has been our main plant. Also very interesting is ghost fungus. So in May each year, because we've got so many dead Banksias, they get covered in the fungus. Absolutely glorious to go in there after dark and just see them glowing green. So really special. So that's what it looks like today underneath the canopy. It's pretty much weed free. We do a run through there in autumn and spring and clean up any asparagus coming up, but it's pretty good condition now. You can see sort of through the middle of it, and you can see the wall of fire response. And those are all acacia longifolia. So in post-fire summary, we started as weeders, and that's how everybody talked about themselves in the group. They were coming in on Thursday mornings to do weeding. We learned to understand the ecosystem by observing it. We adapted our strategy from weeders to ecosystem rehabilitators. We learned to read what the rainforest ecosystem was telling us, what worked and what didn't work, and we continued to adapt the rainforest needs until one day, this all started to happen. So this is after the big swell in August. Thank you. In August last year, 4 days of giant swells. Our shoreline receded 16 metres. There was 30 metres between the beach and the edge of the rainforest. So suddenly, even though we had the bitu there, the salt and the wind were getting in, and we're getting ecosystem collapse along the edge, and there's nothing we can do about it. Right, so what we did do, and when I said nothing we could do, there was nothing physically we'd do. So 2 people from Manning Coastcare were on the Mid-Coast Council's catchment management program, and we had access to all the data that was going on. The CMP sets the long-term strategy for the coordination, coordinated management of the coast with a focus on achieving the objectives of the Catchment Management Act. So it specifically mentions coastal wetlands and littoral rainforest. So we've been on that committee and really pushing for that, and much to our pleasure and surprise is that Mid-Coast Council has adopted what I'm going to talk about next as a strategy. So this is the data we got. This is the hazard mapping for the coast. So on the left is mapping to 2060, on the right is mapping to 2100. The green is going to happen. The orange colour is possibly, the red colour is worst case scenario. And you'll see, for example, by 2060, it's running halfway through the littoral rainforest as it exists now, and by 2100 it's gone. So we know we're going to lose our littoral rainforest. So what we've done, we've developed a strategy to deal with that. And if you look at this, the dotted line is the gully that runs up through the area. The bold blue line is the bedrock, igneous rock bedrock, and that is going to be the new headland. So our proposal is that where we've got that bright green strip of littoral rainforest, that is going to go. We can't stop that. And keep in mind that it's not where the shoreline is, because the wind and the salt penetrate into the rainforest, probably 20, 30 metres. So it's going to do damage very quickly. And we looked at the area behind it, and we decided what we're going to do is we had good resilience up in number 1. That's a real ecotone between littoral rainforest and some scrubland around it. Zone 2 was pre-fire, was an ecotone. Afterwards, it just became a sea of hopbush, acacia saligna and satinwood in dense. So we've been thinning that, and council's coming on board in 2 weeks' time and giving us contractors for 3 days, and they're going to clear the area along the corridor so we can establish that as littoral rainforest. We'll take out all the hopbush, pretty much all the satinwood, and we'll leave the larger acacia longifolia. And we think there'll be enough canopy cover to be able to plant a few secondary species along with the primary. So 3 is the future rainforest. That's already got quite a bit of, that's already got quite a bit of littoral rainforest plant species in there. And 4 is heathland, and we're just going to we call that our guerrilla planting area. We're going to put a few larger, fast-growing, heavy-fruiting plants, celery wood, ribbonwood, into there, and that's going to aid distribution of the seeds, everything moving across into section 3. We are looking at area 2 and 1 really being a fruit forest that the birds are going to be able to eat, and we're going to have the plants up in section 3 that are, again, fast-growing, heavy-fruiting, so that they can move the plants across. And we'll plant mature and secondary species in that area as well. So the red lines you can see are the solid line is where it will be. The red dashed line is worst case scenario. 2100 is the yellow lines, and again, solid line is the where it's going to be. 2100 dotted line is worst case scenario. At the moment, we're online for worst case scenario. So for our volunteers, they're despondent at the loss of the Littoral Rainforest and beach. They're motivated by the Rainforest retreat strategy, which is giving hope and aspiration for the future. This is a generational project. You know, we need 20 years to get it started. We need 30, 40 to get that spreading. Okay, and we're really at that point where I'm going to wrap up. And so at the end of last year, Landcare New South Wales sent a circular questionnaire for everybody to fill out, and they asked, what were your learnings for the last year? And the guys were sitting around with their coffee and muffins, and they said, adaptation. And I was so happy. They'd worked that out. I wasn't prodding them, but they've accepted that what they need to do is adapt. They've got to adapt to that fire and what it's done to the forest. They then have to adapt to the rapidly rising sea level and the very radical sand erosion that's happening. By the way, we're one of the coastal hotspots. You see Terrigal and you see North Entrance on the TV all the time. That's because people's assets are being threatened. Ours isn't. It's only our rainforest and no one cares. So, and we're in that same category. So I'll leave it at that. I'll just say that we're really happy about the way that Mid Coast Council has helped us. We have unlimited access to plants whenever we want them. Not that we're grabbing a lot of plants, but they've been fantastic and very supportive, and we had our 30-year anniversary last week and they all came. Thank you.